Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Goddamn Gamecube, the best goddamn video game podcast there is. My name is Greg, I am your host today, and today is April Fool's Day. The best day to debut our first ever video content, and we are going to discuss a game that everybody hates, which is Quest 64. Now, we are not going to dump on Quest 64 today because I actually like the game and think it's genuinely good, and I think the hate against it is pretty unwarranted, so let's jump right in. Quest 64 released on June 1st, 1998, which is unfortunate because Final Fantasy VII released 6 months before that, and Ocarina of Time came a few months after it. So Quest 64 was squished between arguably the two best action fantasy games ever made, so not a great start, and obviously puts Quest 64, historically speaking, in a massive disadvantage. However, I'm not here to tell you that Quest 64 is better than those games, because it isn't. I'm here to say that Quest 64 stands on its own as a unique action RPG that has several identifying features that I have not seen replicated in action games since. First off, Quest 64 contains a combination battle system, a mix of turn-based and real-time combat. Yes, many RPGs have done battle gauges and so on, but not quite in the way that Quest does. You select spells or melee attacks and have to physically position your character and aim the spell at the enemy before any RNG hits or misses take place. Enemies act the same way, however, when an enemy casts a spell, the player has a split second to maneuver Brian physically to avoid the attack, and if contact is made, RNG hits and misses come into effect with an agility skill. On top of this, your maneuvering range is depicted as a circle in combat, and the better your agility skill, the larger the movement area. I haven't seen this exact combination of real-time action replicated in any way since, although Ni no Kuni comes to mind as a game that's close. Secondly, Quest 64 does include my favorite Elder Scrolls-y aspects of games. Your skills improve as you use them. Similar to the Elder Scrolls, you gain HP and defense by taking damage, and you gain agility by running and dodging attacks. Using magic grants you higher maximum magic points. On top of this, which I always found interesting, when you defeat bosses, you actually are given permanent maximum HP and MP bonuses, which is also something I've never seen replicated in another game. Now, some basic factoids about the gameplay. Gaining spells in Quest 64 is simple and incentivizes exploration. Every time you level up from winning battles, you get to put one level into each of your 4 spell classes or spell schools. But interestingly enough, you also can gain spells and levels by finding them in the world. There are 98 levels to be gained through leveling up, and 98 are findable. When found, just like leveling up, you can choose what spell school you want to invest in. And let's move right on to items, which I also think is handled in a very unique way in this game. Now, I love this. I know gamers hate this. Quest 64 has no monetary system. There is no money. Recovery items are not buyable. They are only obtained in chests and sometimes after combat. So if you waste your healing items, they are gone forever. A local townsperson can give you one of each item if you have none, but that's all. It creates a mindset of resource management and makes the adventure much more challenging, and I support it 100%. It's almost taking a cue from like survival horror games, like saving your items for bosses or critical moments is a key aspect for new players. What I also want to touch on are the aesthetics of the game, especially the soundtrack. Because this game was so poorly received, I think the music is consistently overlooked. To me, the soundtrack stands up to other melodic and thematic scores of the time. If you're a gamer that likes singable melodies and hummable tunes, Quest 64 is loaded with them. Some standouts for me are the melancholy Epona's Cottage, the anxiety-inducing Brannock Castletown, or the grandeur of Limelin and Limelin Castle. A little known fact for you guys, Quest 64 was composed by Masamichi Amano. If you're familiar with the Japanese Battle Royale films, it's actually the same composer, which I didn't know. That I found that very interesting. Final Fantasy and Zelda are iconic for their catchy scores, but in this case, I think Quest 64 is again underrated. Visually, Quest 64 looks great for a 90s 3D game. It was a growth period for the games industry in general, and I think the grand scale of the game, whether it's the shiny Limeland Castle or the forests and towns, I think the visuals are a positive. I personally think each location is very distinct, and it definitely stands up somewhere between Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time. I actually think the game looks pretty damn good. And for all its positives, Quest 64, of course, isn't a perfect game. It definitely isn't, and we should break down some of the flaws of this game. The spell schools in this game are extremely unbalanced. Water is the only school with healing magic, and if you are a new player who chooses not to invest in water magic, you're going to struggle immensely with the game, as limited items are your only recovery source. Also, the spells Avalanche and Magic Barrier are exclusive to the Earth School, and those two spells alone completely break the game, as you are completely immune to enemy spells with Magic Barrier, and Avalanche dumps multiple max-level spells on enemies, all for the price of one spell. So there is no reason to invest in wind magic or fire magic at all, and you can easily max out the two schools with minimal grinding and exploration. On top of this, there is no incentive to diversify your spells because there are no spell combinations or requirements. Secondly, it's easy to get lost in Quest 64's long and sprawling dungeons. After combat, Brian will jump in the direction you were headed, but if you don't keep track of this, you will get turned around, and it will be extremely irritating and confusing to navigate the dungeons. Thirdly, the story in Quest is competent enough, but you're barely given anything to string it together besides the opening sequence and a boss battle with a foe named King Beegis near the end of the game. There are no cinematics or cutscenes, and almost all dialogue is optional. You don't have to talk to anybody, and NPC interaction is extremely limited. I actually think the premise of Quest 64 is totally fine. Your dad goes off to secure some magic book and doesn't return. You defeat major bosses looking for him. You obtain the 4 magic gemstones and eventually find your dad defeated at the penultimate encounter with King Beegis. Spoilers, oh no, you were tricked. The 4 gems and the book your dad was looking for combined to open the world to some evil god named Mammon or Mammon or something. You defeat him, blah blah. It's pretty typical RPG fare of the time, but you can't tell me that other Save the World JRPGs of the time weren't also just as hokey. There are a lot of games that were like this. To summarize my points here, let's get right down to brass tacks. If you think Quest 64 sucks or is broken, you're completely wrong. It's actually a very competent game from both a technical perspective and gameplay perspective. Looking back on it, publications at the time chastised it for being too simple compared to the giants of Final Fantasy VII and Ocarina of Time. Yeah, sure, definitely Quest 64 is incredibly simple, but I actually think retro and nostalgia gamers will actually enjoy the game more now than back then. In our current era of simple indie games, Quest 64 may actually have a more agreeable audience, in my opinion. I personally think Quest 64 was a casualty of the time. Games were going big, epic, and huge, where Quest 64 maybe didn't bring quite enough to the table. Maybe if the story was fleshed out a bit more, or the open world design felt less linear, maybe it would have been better received, but that's really all I have to say about it. I really don't understand the hate against this game at all. It has several unique features, especially in the combat that I talked about, that I have never seen replicated. I love the inventory management system where there's no money and it makes the game way harder. And the aesthetics of the time were of really high quality. The music is really great. Big ups to my brother for burning me a CD of the soundtrack for my birthday so many years ago. That was really funny. And I genuinely like the game. That's all for now. Let me know if you think this was an April Fool's joke in the comments. I want to thank the Quest 64 Discord community for letting me join. And also thank you to Schooly D and Bing Chang for your gameplay clips that I included in this segment. I really appreciate it. I genuinely like this game, and I really love the mod community that I found. I think it's great. I didn't expect to find that. So thank you guys. That's going to do it for me. And if you like goddamn GameCube, please subscribe to our channel. We love you. We appreciate you. And thank you for watching and listening. Thank you guys.